Rivka was buried there. Yaakov was buried there. Esav didn't make it in.
Only his head.
Right? Only his head. Right? Leah was buried there. Rachel, we visit the tomb of Rachel, right? On the way towards Beit Lechem, as the Torah describes it. So we hear about all the burials of the kings. God buried Moshe, the Torah tells us. But we don't find that the Torah tells us, thou shalt bury the person who has died. So there's no clear pasuk on it, but there actually is a pasuk on it. And we'll see from the Gemara, there are two different ways of understanding this pasuk. And we'll see where the halacha brings us on it. In terms of burial, in terms of utilizing a coffin or not utilizing a coffin. Here in the United States, by law, one must utilize a coffin. All right, that's not necessarily, we'll soon see, that's not necessarily part of our tradition. And it will see even that it's not the ideal arrangement. And in Israel, there is no coffin that is used. The person, the body is not visible. The shape of the body is visible. The body is not visible, of course. It's wrapped. It's clothed in the tachrichin and the burial shrouds, and it's wrapped. But it is literally laid down back onto the earth. It is returned to the earth from whence it had come. So, and also discuss mausoleums and the common practice here in California, at least, of the concrete vault. So let us begin with the pasuk in Devarim chapter 21, psukim verses 22 and 23. V'chiyeh be'ish chet mishpat mavet v'humat. The way the English translates it, we'll soon see Ramban has a different view. But if a man commits a sin, mishpat mavet, for which he is sentenced to death, right? The Torah does mandate capital punishment. The Mishnah in Makos tells us that a Beit Din, according to one opinion, a Beit Din that killed once in 7 years was considered murderous. The other opinion is once in 70 years.
Wow.
So it wasn't a common occurrence, but it is a din of the Torah. V'talita oto al eitz. You shall then hang him on a pole. However, lo talin ivlato al eitz. However, do not leave the body on this pole overnight. Lo talin, lina, sleep. Ki kavor tikberenu. But rather, bury him, you shall bury him. Bayom hahu, on that same day. Ki kilat elokim talui. For the hanging of a human body is a blasphemy to Hashem. V'lo tetamed anvatcha, and do not do this and thereby defile the land. Asher Hashem Elokecha notein lecha nachala, that Hashem your God is giving you as an inheritance. So the halach, as it's brought down in the Gemara, though the Ramban learns the simple pshat, the simple understanding differently, but that there are certain cases, extreme cases, when a person cursed out God, idolatry, when there is capital punishment, and then in addition to the capital punishment, the person's body would be displayed, and then by the evening, kabor titbarenu, it shall be buried. The way the Ramban learns this, al derech hapshat, he says, is differently. He understands it as follows. I have it in Hebrew but not in English, but you'll have to trust me on the translation. Ki ish chet gadol. If a person has a serious sin, that such a sin deserves him to receive capital punishment and to be hung up onto a tree, nevertheless, do not hang him up on the tree. Because that is cursed and degrading state for a person. There is no more degrading and humiliating death than that. And therefore it's not proper for the land to become defiled, which will cause God's curse onto the Holy Land. Because that's where God commanded the blessing of life, right, for all time. So the Ramban is understanding the pasuk, if a man sins, and it's such a serious sin that you want to put him to death and hang him on a tree, verse 23, lo talin, don't hang them on a tree. Rather, what should you do? Bury him on that day. Because otherwise, because that is a curse from God to have such an ignoble thing done to the person, and doing that will defile the land.
Excuse me, Rabbi, that means we're talking about doing it to Jewish people.
Correct.
Like, what about something like Irvine?
Was that how he was killed?
He was hanged.
He was hanged. Interesting. Yeah. Interesting. So, according to the way the Gemara understands it, if a person is hanged for an offense, he cannot be left overnight. Okay?
Jew or not?
Well, that's what it would seem, yes.
Yeah, okay.
He was immediately cremated.
I'm sorry?
He was immediately cremated.
Mm-hmm. So, the pasuk here does say, Kavor tikbarenu. Right? You shall bury him. Could we make the argument for or against this being the source for the obligation to bury a person who dies?
No.
We could, or we could differentiate. How would we differentiate? This is talking about specifically who?
A criminal.
A criminal.
A criminal.
A criminal who underwent capital punishment. Only he. Now, kavor tikbarenu, on the other hand, seems to be a double terminology. And, according to the Gemara we'll soon see, there's a way of learning that to mean, not just should this criminal who was hung and then should he be buried, but everyone should be buried. So let's see how the Talmud attacks this. That's on the second side. I have it both in Hebrew and in English. Sure. Amar Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Yochanan said, Mishum, in the name of Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai, Minayin lemalin et meito she'over below ta'aseh. From where do we see that if a person keeps the dead unburied overnight, is over on a lo ta'aseh? And in Jerusalem here we have state laws I believe it's state laws, which cause us to wait a bit, often until the proper paperwork is done, everything is filed. But in Israel, at least in Yerushalayim, they do not keep a body overnight. Person gets buried, right? Even if it's a nighttime burial, the person gets buried. So where do we see that if a person keeps the deceased overnight, she'over alav v'lo ta'aseh, the person has transgressed a bona fide Torah prohibition, a lo ta'aseh. Talmud Loma, the pasuk says, ki kavor tikbarenu. Right? Rather it says, do not leave it overnight. Rather, what must you do? You must bury it. Mikan lemalinit meito she'over below ta'aseh. So we see that keeping it overnight, as opposed to burying it, you transgress a lo ta'aseh. Ika da'amrei, there are those that say, Rav Yochanan's statement did not make it into a Torah prohibition, but rather he said in the name of Shemei Remez likvura min haTorah minayin. Oh, where does the Torah allude, hint to this idea of burial? Not an obligation. There's a hint to it. Talmud Lomar ki kavor tikvarenu. Rather, you shall bury it. Mikan remez likvura min haTorah. This is a hint that burial is something that the Torah wants us to do, right? Even though they're speaking specifically about this person who received capital punishment, but it's a hint that this is and should be the practice in all situations. Yes, Janet?
Also, don't we have the exemplar of Abraham bearing Sarah?
We don't find an obligation.
No.
We have examples. Yeah, that's how I began with that. We have many examples, but we don't see any obligations.
The exception, of course, was Haman.
But
Yeah.
wouldn't
Yeah.
those
That was the
examples
exception.
Yeah.
Wouldn't those examples be these so-called hints?
I'm sorry?
Wouldn't those examples be these so-called hints? You know how you said a hint?
All that says is that's what was done. Right? Well, we'll see in a moment. Right? Now, actually, Haman, that Ida's bringing up, he was hung not by the Jews,
Right.
No.
right? He was hung by Achashverosh, right? Amalei Shavor Malka. Shavor Malka said to Rav Chama, Kavur min haTorah minayin. Where is burial found in the Torah? Ishtik, he was silent. V'lo amalei v'lo midi, he didn't answer. Amar Rav Acha bar Yaakov. Rav Acha bar Yaakov was upset that Rav Chama did not respond. He said, Imser Alma biyadad tipshoi. The world has been given over into the hands of the foolish. Di boile lemeimar. He should have answered. Ki kavor. Right? When the pasuk says, rather, don't leave him overnight, rather you shall bury. Tila avile aron. That teaches us that there needs to be a coffin. Tikbarenu. Bury him. The second time it's repeated. Right? So Gemara says, Lo mashma le. I'm sorry. He just said ki kavor. So he said, no, he would have responded, that means to make a coffin. Tikbarenu. But it repeats it. That's what teaches burial. He says, no, lo mashma le. He wouldn't hear that extra teaching from that word. Very often the Torah writes it in such a way, you surely shall bury. That's why it repeats it twice. The name of me ikvor tzadike. Why don't we bring the precedent that the righteous ones were buried? Minhaga ba'alma. That was just the minhag. That's what people would do. Midikavidosh baruch hu Moshe. But God buried Moshe. Right? So you can't say that was the custom. Right? Nevertheless, even God did not want to deviate from the custom of that time. The argument could have been made. But not that is what must be done. So we see in the Gemara that there are two different approaches to this pasuk. Is it a Torah obligation? Or is it a hint from the Torah, but there is no Torah obligation on it? The Rambam, Maimonides, in the Laws of Avelut, says as follows, writes as follows. A eulogy is an honor. Ha'esped kavod hametu. The eulogy is an honor for the deceased. Lefikach, therefore, kofen et hayorshim. We will force the heirs, litein sechar, to pay the payment for mekonanin v'mekonanot, v'sofninoso, for those who lament the person and those who eulogize him. V'im tziva shelo yispadu. But let's say the niftar, the deceased, gave clear directions, I do not want to be eulogized. Ein sofninoto. Then we do not eulogize. Aval tziva shelo yikaver. But if he commanded, don't bury me, ein shomin lo. Then we will not listen to his directions. Shakavura mitzvah, the Rambam says. Because the burial is a mitzvah, shenemar, as it says, ki kavor tikvarenu. Rather, what should you do? Bury, you shall bury. So not just the case over here, the capital murder, but all cases of death, what shall you do? You must go ahead and bury. How do we understand this burial? How do we define what is meant by a burial? So the Gemara also has a question. Is the purpose of the burial to prevent any desecration, or does that serve as an atonement for the deceased? And Rashi explains this. That's the very top of the third page here. Mishum, is it Mishum Bizyonahu? In order to prevent any degradation, desecration. Shelo yitbazel la'ayin kol. That he should not be in such a degraded state before everyone's eyes. Shira'uhu mate, v'nirka, v'nivka. That people should see him dead, and the body going through what it goes through after death. Oh, or, Rashi says, explain the Gemara, is it ki hechid tahavi le kapara, in order that he should have atonement. B'hatmana zo, with this being covered over, shemoridin umashpilin oto b'tachtiot, that he is lowered down into the earth, b'tachtiot, into the lower part of the earth. That person is buried in the ground, 6 feet under. I'm not sure if that is that American law, 6 feet? I don't think it is. I think it's just an expression. Yeah. I guess that was what was standard. Actually, I was at a funeral that took place somewhere in Los Angeles. I think it was up in the valley.
Right this way, yeah.
The valley. Yeah.
Oh, and it was on this rolling hill.
Yeah.
And it was a little bit shocking just how close, just how little earth there was. It was in a concrete vault, if I remember correctly. It was a bit shocking just how little earth there was covering on this rolling hill.
My aunt is buried there.
Yeah.
Another place.
Yeah. But we see from Rashi that where is the burial supposed to take place? B'tachtiot, in the ground. Now, there's an interesting Yerushalmi. Yerushalmi is the Jerusalem Talmud. And this is talking about when Rabbi, the great Rabbi Yehuda Anasi, was about to die. He gave different directions, orders that should be fulfilled upon his death. And he said, Misha nitpal bi b'chayai, yitapel bi b'moti. Those who took care of me, who were with me in my lifetime, those are the ones who should be with me and take care of me upon my death. Amar, Rabbi Chananya de Sikorim, Kigon, Yossi, he explained like who? Yossi Ephrati, Yossi from Ephrat, the Yosef Chafni, and Rabbi Chizkiah. Mosif. And then he added on, Al tarbu alai tachrichin. Don't have a lot of the burial, don't have a lot of garments on me of the tachrichin, the burial shrouds. Utehei aroni nekuva ba'aretz. And my coffin should have holes, thereby connecting it to the ground.
Rabbi,
Yes.
if a person dies on a long ship, on a ship on a long journey in the middle of the ocean, it'll be days before you get to any shore. What is the halacha?
So we would wait until we
Yeah.
come to land, and
You
then the
wait
person would
until
die.
you-
Yes.
Oh,
Yes.
No matter what.
Yeah.
my son was died in Hawaii, and many people die in Hawaii, sportsmen, and the airplanes do not have enough room to bring them to America, the mainland. We had to wait over a week because there just was no place. And the rabbi actually went to Hawaii to check him out and everything, but he said that's we have to wait.
Yeah.
So therefore, within 24 hours does not apply. Could be days before you get to shore.
Yes.
Yeah.
What about King David and the sons of King Shaul who were given over?
So those are the operative words over there. There they were given over. And that's what I forgot what town that was. But that's what they did. They were given over. And there it was because of this plague and because of this Chilul Hashem that had resulted. Right? But there it was, like you said, it was given over.
Rabbi?
Yes.
In the case such as Ida was saying, or other cases where the delay is, as Chayritka was regrettably sadly saying, would, like Yosef, would you then do things, or according to this other viewpoint of the degradation of the body, would you try and do things to...
No, we would just do our best Tara that we could at that point, and then wait. Yeah. So Ramban, again, only Hebrew, I apologize. He writes, "Nimseinu lemeidim sha'osa aron lemeit," that a person who makes an aron, a coffin, for the deceased, umeinicho, and leaves that bebeit hakvarot, so the person's in a casket but not buried, eina kavura, that's not considered burial. Uvichlal, and that's in the category of malin meito, what the Torah says don't do, leaving the body unburied overnight. Va'over alav, and one transgresses on that. Vim asa aron, the person made a coffin, v'kavro b'karka, and then buried that coffin in the ground, eina over alav. Then one has not transgressed that. Afal pikein, but nevertheless, yafa yalakovro ba'aretz. But it's best for the body to be buried directly in the earth. The kvurat eretz mamish, because burial in the ground itself, that is the mitzvah kitzavato, like the tzava, like the command, the instructions, the will that was given by Rabbi, va'afilu b'chutz la'aretz, even outside of the land of Israel. Umashenadu chachmei Yisroel b'gemara ba'arono, that we find that the sages of Israel in the time of the Gemara did use coffins, aronot, la'achar ikul habasar havi. That was only after the body had been placed in the ground and the flesh had already decomposed, as it says in the Yerushalmi. Or what they would do is nokvin aron la'aretz, or they would make holes in it. Like I said again, here by law we need to have a coffin. Orthodox Jewish practice is to have a simple wooden casket, right?
With no nails.
Right, simple wooden casket. And in Israel, where there is no such law, that is not the normal practice. And the person is laid down, right, directly into the earth. Shulchan Aruch, Code of Jewish Law, says, Hanosei meto ba'aron, if a person, very similar to what Ramban said, places their dead in a coffin, v'lo kavra b'karka, do not bury it down in the earth, over mishum malin etamet, they are transgressing that commandment that we saw in the Torah of not leaving the body overnight unburied. V'mnasna ba'aron v'kavra b'karka, and if one put it into the aron and buried in the ground, one has not transgressed that. But it's best to do it in the ground itself, even in chutz la'aretz. Now, there are those that argue that the reason why Rebbe wanted the hole in his coffin was not in order to be attached to the ground, but this was where Rebbe was being buried. It was very wet, and like that, it would not get washed away. Some explain, right? Meaning, if there's a hole in it, then the water will go inside, and it's not going to, right? Otherwise, it's going to remain somewhat buoyant and could be washed away by some of the water. But again, what we do is, ideally, when we can, we'd have some holes in it, but it's not necessary, and the burial takes place in the ground. I was recently asked by someone about a mausoleum. Mausoleums are buildings above the ground, and the grave is placed in an above-ground coffin. Some people prefer mausoleums. I think it's more dignified. It could be save money because
More expensive.
Really. But don't they stack in a mausoleum?
Mm-hmm.
So why would it be more expensive?
Because they're making money on people's fear of being buried.
Yeah, that's what it is.
Some people might be claustrophobic, think of that for a
Yeah.
You also have to factor in the expense of, fighting politically the Democrats against building the wall.
Okay. All right. Now, the Gemara mentions something that might be a reference to that, but there are different views. The Gemara is discussing a case that people were taking earth from the area where Rebbe had been buried, and we're using that as for growing purposes, right? And the Gemara was discussing, can one get benefit from that grave area? The Gemara the original approach was that anything that is mechubar lakarka, that's attached to the ground, there is no prohibition of deriving benefit from it. The Gemara then asks a question from the following case. And this is the bottom over here, Mausoleums, Talmud Sanhedrin 47b. I have it in Hebrew. Do I not have it in English? I'm sorry. I don't have it in English. Hachot seiv kever la'aviv. A person dug a grave for his father. V'halav v'kav makam acher. And then, right, moved him to another place. Hari ze lo yikaver bo olamit. Right? Then you can never bury there. Right? You can never use that burial ground.
The first one, you mean?
Correct. So that seems to be indicating that the ground, we say this hallowed ground, right? That the ground actually becomes asur, becomes prohibited for any other usage. The Gemara says, no, what's the case over there? Bikever binyan. Oh, it's kever, a coffin, binyan, building. So that seems to be talking about, it's not the earth there, it's the building. So it seems that one got buried in a building, in a mausoleum. And the Gemara seems to be bringing that as, that's what it's talking about. That's a possibility. However, the way that most of the commentators understand it is either that it was a building that was covered with earth afterwards, or that it was like a mound and a building, and the person was buried in the ground, but in this mound, right? So the person was in the earth, but it was in a mound. Or we're talking about something that we often see, actually, that there is a building there, and there's earth there as part of that building. The building is there to give honor to the deceased, but where is the deceased buried?
In the earth.
In the earth, under the ground. So when it comes to a mausoleum, Rav Moshe ruled, Hine, certainly, Vadai, it's clear, Shelivnot mausoleum, to build a mausoleum, Shu binyan im kuchim, Shenibnu bo. It's a building with these different graves that are built into it. Lahaniach shametim, and to place a deceased person there, hu isur gadol. It is a very serious prohibition. Dat sarach likbor dafka bekarka, because the burial must be done specifically where? In the ground, in the earth. Kemefurash, as it is explicit in Sanhedrin 46b, which is the Gemara that we had quoted up above. Mikra, from the pasuk of Tikvarenu, that he must be buried. Shelosagi lanicho baron. It's not enough to place it into an aron, into a coffin, but rather that must then be placed into the earth. The ifsekain, the Tur, the Shulchan Aruch, and this was the ruling in both the Tur and the Shulchan Aruch that we read above. Simin Shen Samach Bet Sif Aleph Hanotin et Meito Ba'arav V'lo Karva B'Karka Over Mishum Malan et Hamet. If one has the person, has the deceased in a coffin but not buried in the ground, they have gone against the prohibition of leaving the body overnight. Yes, Chaim.
Does it have something to do with that Adam came from the earth?
It has a lot to do.
Yeah, it
Right.
says, one of the prayers, I don't know if it's...
Ki afar ata ve'el afar tashuv. You are of the earth, and to the earth you will return.
Yeah.
Yes. And on a hashkafic, Kabbalistic level, right, because the body needs to decompose in order that it can be rebuilt in a way ready for the stage of Tchiyat HaMetim. How about what's common here in California, though not in all? I went to, I've gone to some, there's a cemetery in Los Angeles itself. Right?
That's the one off the freeway?
Yeah,
And
pretty
you
close.
can see it. You can see it.
Pretty
when you
close
drive.
off the freeway. They don't use vaults over there. Right? But the concrete vaults. So, very interestingly, the question was posed about the concrete vaults. It was posed to Rabbi Yitzchak Elchanan Spector. And then the issue was a very, very different issue. There, this is in the 19th century, the 1800s, the schools, doctors, did not have bodies from which they can do their teaching and experiments. So it was a common horrific thing that people would steal the bodies. Remember Tale of Two Cities? Right? They would steal the bodies and sell them to the doctors, to medical schools. So therefore, the wealthier people were hiring a guard to literally guard the gravesite for a few weeks' time, and at that point already, the body would not be really usable, sellable to science. So the question was posed to him about burying in a concrete vault, which would thereby protect the deceased from these grave thieves. And Rabbi Yoshua
Is that
Flug.
what they say, grave digger?
Yeah, well,
In the mausoleum, they're not doing much digging.
yeah. Yeah, the grave diggers are normally those who dig the grave for the
Oh,
burial.
okay, right. But I just thought maybe they're
not to undo
undigging.
the burial.
Grave undigging.
So I have over here a patent that was filed in 1926 for a concrete burial vault. And in the patent it read, this invention relates to a monolithic type of concrete burial vault and is referenced especially to a two-piece concrete burial vault that is adapted to be air-sealed and airtight. An object of the invention is to provide a concrete burial vault that are not liable to cave in or to permit loose dirt or gravel to fall onto the ceiling joint of the burial vault. Another object is to provide a concrete burial vault which shall have no visible or accessible joint, but shall be substantially smooth externally when completed, and without accessible or visible lowering or lifting devices that might facilitate grave robbing. Right? So this patent in 1926 for this concrete vault was, one of the purposes was in order to prevent grave robbing. And that was the question that was posed to Rabbi Yisroel Chanan Spector, and he allowed it. I have over here from Rav Moshe Feinstein, when he issued his ruling in the 1970s, 80s, was no longer an issue of the grave robbing, but another issue that we have. And the question was posed, is that considered, is that burying in the earth? Is that burying in the ground or not? Or is that like, perhaps a underground mausoleum?
Concrete is earth.
Yeah,
So Rav Moshe says as follows:
That
B'davar beit kvarot, in the matter of cemeteries. Now it's no longer people trying to protect their loved ones that is the issue that is posing the question about these concrete vaults. Now it is the cemeteries. Shemachmar hageshamim harabim, because of much rain. Kashel lachpor kever. It's difficult to dig the grave. Ki huklash hakarka. The land, the earth is very, very soft from all of the rain. When you dig this grave site, the walls fall in from the adjoining grave site. And therefore many cemeteries have decided they will bury each person in a vault. Cement. They make a cement box. And into that into that they place the coffin of the deceased. And then the vault and the coffin, and of course the deceased, is buried then in the ground, underground. If they are allowed to bury in such a way, right? Perhaps you have to bury in the earth itself, as it says in Shulchan Aruch, Yoredeya Simin Shin Samach Bet. That is the halacha that we keep referring back to. Hine be'etzem biton hu kedin afar uvakarka shuhu beiton hikvura ma'alyata kama vakarka shel avanim. He says that cement has the status of earth and in the ground, and it is a fully qualified burial as if it was in the earth itself. The earth has avanim, has stones. Uve'emen gadol, and let's say there's a large stone that's down in the ground. Kishu b'karka, when it's down underground, im chatzav b'tocha kever, if a person were to chisel out an indentation in that large stone in the bedrock over there in order to lay the deceased down there, that is fine. Okay, this is another issue that when I accompanied at a tahara, the tahara is the purification of the body to ready it for the burial. So there is an opinion that earth must be placed on the eyes and on the mouth of the deceased. And what we do, what the Chevra Kadisha does, is they don't put earth, they put earthenware. They put pieces of broken pottery over the eyes and over the mouth. And those charasim, that earthenware, that stoneware basically is what it is, that is in place of the earth. And that's brought by the shach. Even though that is from broken piece of pottery, shenitzrufu b'kivshan, and that went through, it was cooked, so to speak, in a kiln, in a furnace, and that's what turned it into this earthenware. And that is considered to be a fulfillment of the requirement to place earth onto the niftar, onto the deceased. The kol shekain beton, certainly cement. Shehu me'afar karka kazeh shelo nitzvu b'kivshan. That was not baked in a furnace. El b'mayim tzonanin. Rather, cold water was added, and that's what helped turn it into the cement. That certainly is considered to be the earth, and therefore that certainly is considered to be a proper burial. We had actually another example of this idea that cement is considered to be earth, and that is in the formation of our mikvah. A mikvah, it comes about through the collection of natural rainwater, and we collected the natural rainwater. Now, if the natural rainwater is collected in a vessel and then moved to a mikvah, once it's in a vessel, once it's in a kli, it is disqualified. It can't be used. So therefore, the collection must be in a collection pool that does not have the qualification, the classification of a kli, of a vessel. Otherwise, we don't have a kosher mikvah. And therefore, we actually brought out a rabbi from New York who was an expert, it was before my time, brought out an expert, a mikveh expert, who supervised the pouring of the concrete for that collection pools of the mikveh, to make sure that it's considered that it pooled naturally in the earth. Right. So it came off of the roof, and it pooled in our collection pool, but that was considered pooling on the earth, not in a vessel, even though it was pooling in a concrete area, because concrete is considered to be the earth. So as long as it was poured in a certain way that it was never a separate unit, so that was considered to be pooling in the earth, and that is how we have our top-level, kosher and beautiful mikveh here on our premises.
There was a picture of it in one of the calendars we had.
Yeah.
A long time ago.
Oh, of when they were actually doing the pouring.
Yeah.
I saw that
the other
picture.
thing I was thinking, stoneware has a glaze, which is a chemical, and the idea is to seal it, so therefore the stoneware doesn't dissolve like earth.
Yeah. I'm pretty sure what they use there is simple pottery shards.
Simple pottery shards, like
Yeah.
garden,
Correct.
like you use in a garden.
Correct.
Kind of thing.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yes, Jen.
So another case of wayfaring and a death, as Ida has said, supposing you're like out in the wilderness or mountains and the earth is the pack is very low, and then you gave the example of carving out a Nishan stone. If you could find enough pebbles and rocks to cover the deceased and was able to get like 2 inches before it was really hard ground, could you do pebbles and rocks?
So you would make a mound over the person
Oh,
Yeah.
of pebbles and rocks.
of whatever you cut. Yeah, you would make a mound over the
But so
person.
pebbles and
Certainly, pebbles and rocks are earth.
Yeah,
Okay.
they are.
That's what earth is.
But pebbles and rocks can,
Taking
the wind
out
can
of the
blow them.
cement pool and putting it into the mikveh, the water. How do you get it over there?
We don't we don't get it over there. There's the collection pool over here, and there is the immersion pool over here, and there is a pipe that links the two.
Okay, so
Right.
they're the same level and it's
It's
always,
the same level, exactly right.
so,
So actually, in a regular case, you fill the collection pool, and once that's filled, then you fill the immersion pool with city water that's already been treated and everything like that, right? And once they come in contact, once water comes in contact with a kosher mikveh, which is the immersion pool, it all gets the status of a mikveh. Since this was a joint project with Chabad and the non-Chabad, well, the Jewish world at large, when you make a mikveh, you have your collection pool next to, adjacent to the immersion pool. Chabad is of the opinion that the collection pool should be under the immersion pool. So we built the immersion pool under the steps that lead down to the mikveh is actually a whole open area, which we closed with fiberglass and cut a large hole there. And under the mikveh itself is an area for water, which is the amount, the volume for a kosher mikveh. So what we did actually was we